Get him here, right here, right here. Come on. Hold on to me, you're good. We got your car right here.
On February 23, 2026, Christian County Deputy Gabriel Ramirez stopped a white Chevrolet pickup along Highway 160 south of Highlandville, Missouri. Minutes later, residents found the 30-year-old deputy lying in the roadway. He had been shot, the truck was gone, and the driver had disappeared. Ramirez was a U.S. Army veteran who had joined the Christian County Sheriff's Office less than a year earlier. His death immediately turned a rural traffic stop into a regional manhunt. Investigators identified the driver as 45-year-old Richard Dean Byrd. Byrd was already known to law enforcement. In Kansas, he had previously been convicted in a case involving gunfire during a police pursuit, and in Missouri, he was facing newer property and drug-related charges. Authorities now considered him armed, dangerous, and willing to confront police. A blue alert was issued as officers searched highways, back roads, and rural properties across southwest Missouri. They were looking for Byrd's white 2001 Chevrolet Silverado. For investigators, the first urgent task was simple: find the truck before Byrd could disappear farther into the Ozarks. The shooting had happened in a sparsely populated area where a vehicle could leave the highway and vanish onto smaller roads. Every minute widened the search area and increased the risk that another officer or resident might encounter him first. The truck was eventually found abandoned about 15 miles away near Reed's Spring. That discovery changed the nature of the search. Byrd was now somewhere on foot, in a landscape of wooded ridges, cedar thickets, open fields, and scattered homes. Local deputies were joined by the Missouri State Highway Patrol, U.S. Marshals, the FBI, and the ATF. More than 100 officers became involved while residents in the area were warned to remain inside. For hours, teams worked outward from the abandoned truck, trying to determine where Byrd had gone. Late that night, the search finally narrowed. Around 11:30 p.m., a Missouri State Highway Patrol aircraft detected a moving heat signature in the woods. Ground teams were directed toward the area. When deputies closed in, Byrd opened fire. Christian County Deputy Josh Wahl was shot in the leg. Webster County Deputy Austin McCall was struck 4 times. The gunfire came from higher ground where trees and brush gave Byrd cover and made it difficult for officers to reach the wounded men without exposing themselves. The search had now become a rescue operation as much as a manhunt. Christian County Deputy Michael Hislope moved toward the injured deputies. He was shot and killed. Hislope was 40 years old, an Army veteran, and had served with the Christian County Sheriff's Office since 2019. At that point, 2 deputies had been killed in the same chain of events, and 2 others were wounded, while Byrd remained armed somewhere in the woods. Officers eventually managed to pull Wahl and McCall away from the gunfire. Both survived after being hospitalized and undergoing surgery. But the danger had not ended. Byrd was still positioned in terrain that made a direct approach risky. Rather than continue sending officers forward on foot, law enforcement brought in an armored Bearcat and used aircraft and drones to keep track of his location. The armored vehicle allowed officers to move closer while reducing the risk of another rescue attempt turning deadly. Byrd continued firing toward law enforcement. Officers returned fire. When teams finally reached his position, Byrd had suffered multiple gunshot wounds. He was pronounced dead at the scene, and the rifle beside him was secured. The manhunt was over. By then, the search had continued into February 24. What began before sunset with 1 traffic stop had turned into an hours-long operation involving local, state, and federal agencies across rural Missouri. Investigators still had important questions about the beginning of the case. Authorities have said they do not know exactly why Ramirez first stopped Byrd. Sheriff Brad Cole also cautioned against assuming Byrd knew about a newly issued warrant at the time, saying that had not been established. What was clear was the sequence that followed. Ramirez was killed during the initial roadside encounter. Byrd abandoned his truck and disappeared into the surrounding countryside. Aerial surveillance eventually located him. When deputies moved in, he opened fire again, killing Hislope and wounding Wahl and McCall before being killed by law enforcement. At a memorial service, Sheriff Cole remembered Ramirez and Hislope as men who had already served their country in the Army before choosing to serve their community in law enforcement. That is what separates this case from a typical fugitive search. The scale of the response was dramatic, but the real story was not the number of officers, helicopters, drones, or armored vehicles involved. It was how quickly one roadside encounter expanded into a second deadly confrontation miles away. By the time it ended, Gabriel Ramirez and Michael Hislope were dead. Josh Wahl and Austin McCall were wounded but alive, and Richard Byrd's flight from police had ended in the same woods where authorities finally found him. For more evidence-led true crime cases where one detail changes everything, subscribe to Case Depth.